많은 미국인들은 부동산 게임을 할 만큼 현금이 충분하지 않습니다. 그러나 월가는 대안을 제공합니다. 투자자들은 이를 REITs라고 부릅니다.
A REIT is a real estate investment trust, and you can actually buy a stock of that on the stock exchange. It is publicly traded. It is a way of investing without buying a house.
그러나 REITs는 주택보다 훨씬 더 많은 것을 보장할 수 있습니다.
So here's what's in my portfolio. Government properties, storage, billboards, standalone box stores. There is enormous opportunity.
부동산 투자 신탁은 미국 부동산에서 약 4조 5천억 달러에 달하는 자산을 관리합니다.
It's why a lot of high net worth individuals like real estate in their portfolios, the tax efficiency of it. Provides diversification, provides yield, it provides inflation protection.
우리는 최근 몇 년간 미 전역에서 역사적인 거래들을 조용히 성사시켰습니다.
Estimated 150 million people in the United States alone own REITs, either in their retirement account, in their mutual funds, through their brokers, etc. So everybody's exposed to it, they just don't know it.
이러한 월가의 자금은 무엇을 어떻게 구축할지에 대한 발언권을 가지게 됩니다.
In order to acquire the loan and to get the financing, the REIT is going to insist on certain amenities. It may insist on certain insurance coverage. And they're building in areas where heretofore it was an area that wasn't seen as, let's say, prime.
I mean, this building cost $150 million. I didn't actually have $150 million in my checking account and then wrote the check for it. We had to go to banks and investors and raise the money. Having REITs there as a likely exit helps the market and helps the availability.
리츠의 급속한 성장은 일부 전문가들의 우려를
When you
불러일으킵니다.
build a property and then sell it to a real estate investment trust that is controlled by Wall Street, it puts a lot of pressure on the tenants. There are quarterly reports, there are profit margins that have to be met. That means most likely that the properties that they're selling off, if they're rentals, will just increasingly become more expensive.
리츠는 미국 부동산 산업을 어떻게 변화시켰으며 주택 구입에 대한 좋은 대안이 될까요? 리츠의 부동산 파트를 시작합니다. 주택은 미국인들이 부동산에 접근하는 가장 전형적인 방법입니다. 사람들은 단일 자산에 투자하면 시간이 지남에 따라 가치가 오르기를 바랍니다. 그러나 리츠는 다른 개념의 자산입니다.
You're not exposed to one house, you're not exposed to 20 houses, you're exposed to 20,000 of them.
Most individual investors will say, well, maybe they own their house and that's their real estate. But occupied real estate serves as a different purpose in one's investment portfolio versus investment properties. And so REITs are a way for individuals to get that access.
You have to be very smart with your strategy. You have to know about legislation, you have to know about taxes, because these decisions typically run 5 to 10 years.
시간이 지남에 따라 제공되는 권리의 수와 다양성이 증가했습니다.
Back in 1960s, 70s, 80s, maybe there were 3 or 4 different types. It was your office REITs, some hotels, industrial, and multifamily. Now I can count at least 20 different types. Your casinos are REITs. Your single-family homes are REITs. The data center where your servers are located are REITs.
Digital Realty Trust is one of the big ones in data centers, and that's such an interesting area because you're seeing AI, you're seeing the cloud, so much investment in that, so you know that's going to be a big growth sector.
지난 10년 동안 셀프 스토리지 및 산업용 리츠 펀드는 큰 수익을 거두었습니다. 그러나 주거용 주택의 경우 목재, 소매 및 사무실 자금의 성과는 저조했습니다. 대부분의 리츠는 아파트 단지와 특수 지역에 중점을 둡니다.
That gives them some level of comfort in being able to be, sort of leaders in building communities. Because ultimately what you're doing is, profiting. You're also building community by developing newer assets.
미국에서 주택 가격이 지난 10년 사이에 인플레이션을 감안해도 18% 이상 상승했습니다. 상승의 가장 큰 요인은 공급이 제한되어 있기 때문입니다.
Back in 2018, when there was a lot of meltdown, a lot of real estate owned REOs on the market from houses, individual owned houses, and REITs looked at it and they said, this is an opportunity for us to fulfill a market demand that heretofore was unrecognized. And we think that we can do it at a lower price point because our expertise is in managing rental properties.
There are only two residential single-family rental REITs, and that's American Homes for Rent and Invitation Homes. They were landlords. That is, they would buy up homes and then they would rent them out. What they're doing a lot more, though, now is building these homes for rent. So you're seeing a lot of single-family new rental homes. There are so many people now who, because of higher interest rates, can't afford to buy a home, but they still want that single-family home in a community with the backyard and the good school district. So they're getting into these single-family rental homes.
We really expect that to be a growing segment of the rental market business going forward over the next 10 years.
많은 리츠들이 도시와 교외 지역 전체를 재편하는 프로젝트를 지원하고 있습니다.
They do a lot of mixed use, like having grocery located near their properties. And they do that out of a concerted effort to be able to analyze the market demand to go into non-competitive submarkets. So something that you build in the villages down in Orlando may look differently if you build it in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Initially, this market was looked at to see that the boomers who were retiring really didn't want the maintenance of a home and wanted to move into a rental that has since transpired that different demographic groups are really looking at this, from Generation Z to millennials to X's to boomers, all like this concept.
그러나 저소득층 미국인들에게는 월가의 고급 주택 선호가 문제를 야기할 수 있습니다.
Properties under professional management that are owned by corporations have faster rent increases and also higher vacancy rates. They have these algorithms that tell them, you know what, we should keep prices artificially high. And if we don't have a person in here for a month or two, that's okay, because we're eventually going to get somebody at that higher price because people are just desperate for housing. The area where we're in a real crisis is at the low end of the market. You know, building new luxury apartments that are renting for $2,500 for a studio isn't going to fix that problem.
이것이 리츠의 부동산 파트입니다. 이제 투자 신탁에 대해 알아봅니다. 투자 신탁은 잘 설립되면 강력한 세금 혜택을 제공할 수 있습니다. 부동산에 투자하는 신탁은 큰 배당금을 지급하는 경향이 있습니다.
REITs were meant to provide regular income as an entity, which meant that 90% of their profits needed to go back to the shareholders as dividends.
1960년대 의회는 이른바 리츠의 핵심 조항을 도입했습니다. 투자 자금은 부동산 개발에 집중해야 하며 대부분의 이익을 주주들에게 돌려주어야 합니다.
We currently pay about a 5.3% dividend yield. That in its own right is a nice yield, but when you look at the after-tax equivalent of that yield, it is very compelling. Real estate can be a very tax-efficient asset class because the investor gets to deduct the depreciation. The depreciation from our properties has covered 100% of the income and cash generated by those properties. And there's no tax owed on that dividend.
고배당 리츠 펀드는 저금리 시대에 엄청난 성장을 이루었고 부채 중심의 사업을 가속화시키고 높은 주택 인플레이션을 불러일으켰습니다.
In a very low interest rate environment like we've seen, it was an alternative for investors to get a high dividend, which they weren't going to be able to do due to
일부
inflation.
민주당 의원들은 월가의 리츠가 최근 부동산 시장에서 너무 많은 이점을 가지고 있다고 믿고
They're
있습니다.
making it harder for people to buy their first house because they're competing with big Wall Street firms. Second, they're making it harder for local communities to have local landlords. Now, instead of having a landlord who you can talk to down the street if you are late on a rent payment, you're basically paying rent to Wall Street.
Yes, there are changes that are being requested, but I think at the same time, it's those kind of tax codes and that kind of investment that has made the commercial real estate grow since the 1980s.
The Wall Street area, gauging the financial health of the nation.
전문가들은 미국에서 세 번째로 큰 자산군인 상업용 부동산에서 권리가 더욱 중요해지고 있다고 믿습니다.
So by default, REITs being the more efficient and preferred way of owning real estate should get a lion's share of that because, the amount of capital that's raised to invest in REITs or commercial real estate in general is to the tune of $300 billion. I'd say it's a matter of when, not if, that the activity picks up really fast.
REITs는 부동산 시장에 유동성을 제공합니다. 예를 들어 KKR은 2022년 포스트 브라더스로부터 필라델피아 외곽에 있는 대규모 단지를 구입했습니다.
When it comes to multifamily investments, very focused on how attractive is this property as a place to live for individuals. And then the other thing that we look to is how attractive is a given market in terms of are people moving to that market? And Philadelphia is an example of a market that we think has great long-term prospects.
The biggest sale in Philadelphia of an apartment before we sold Presidential City ever had been like $250 million. What really helped that transaction happen was that it had an assumable loan. We sold it in the fall of last year. Interest rates had already moved up significantly. Today, if there's not an assumable loan on a property, people cannot pay anywhere near the pricing they would have paid 2 years ago because
미국에서 판매되는 많은 신규 주택이 이 집단에서 나올 수 있습니다. 왜냐하면 많은 사람들이 팬데믹 중에 구입한 낮은 모기지 금리 주택에 집착하기 때문입니다. 워싱턴의 정책 입안자들은 월가의 부동산 신탁으로 가득 차 있는 시장에서 점점 더 가족들에게 공평한 기회가 오기를
Buying a
희망하고
house
있습니다.
is still one of the primary factors of building wealth in the United States. But at the same time, there's a rising demographic change, especially among the Zs, that says that may not fit for us.
We do have real estate developers that want to maximize their profits, but I think we need to think about how do we do equitable growth? And I think that's the key for our cities right now in America. We don't have a lot of equitable growth.